So we'll start with our refuge prayer. And refuge is really just a way of, even though we're chanting a prayer that's in Tibetan and it has a translation and it sounds very, maybe very out of this world. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, what are those? What the prayer is really about is just finding safety and finding a place of home within ourselves to practice and finding and remembering that we have support in the world for our practice. We have people in our life and we have people in our past that have supported us and nurtured us and given us the courage to look inside. And that's really the meaning of the refuge prayer, just remembering that we're not alone in our practice, something like that. So feel free to join me, but you don't have to chant with us. If you're not familiar, you can also just read it. Sanje chedan sochi chonam la Zhang chu bardu dani chap su chi da ki chen so chi pe so nam chi dro la pen che san che dru pa ro san che che dan so chi cho nam la Zhang shu bardu dani chap su chi da ki chen so chi pe so nam chi dro la pen shi san che dru pa ro. In Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, we go for refuge until enlightened by the power of generosity and the other perfections. May we realize Buddhahood for the benefit of all. We can read the second prayer there on page 1. I and all beings are primordially Buddha. Knowing this to be true, I am aligned with supreme enlightened mind. Oh, let's begin by coming down from the thinking mind into the feeling body. And just noticing how you feel right now on the cushion. Maybe clear and bright, or sleepy, or nervous, or excited. And whatever it is, just welcoming what you feel as it is, and honoring that. This is how I feel, and it's okay. All feelings are welcome. Letting attention float down to the base of this earth body. Where your seat meets the cushion or the chair. And just noticing that down here at the base of your body, you are already grounded, earthy, and supported. Allow this stable earth body to ground your restless mind. And you might even imagine that the base of your spine is growing down into the earth below, growing roots, winding down into the soil. Spreading out around the base of your body, like the roots of a great tree. Feeling grounded, anchored, held. And noticing that all these other beings around you and if you're on the Zoom throughout this world, that we are all connected through the roots. Grounded, stable, and connected. And now noticing that with every inhale, you're breathing in the out breath of the other trees. With every warm exhale, you are sending out breath for the other trees. co-breathing. Noticing that you and these other trees have been through things. Your bark has been scraped by a brown bear, or one of these trees has been hit by lightning. Another one survived a drought. And they still stand, breathing. Healed with the sap and the bark, carrying their scars. Their beautiful contortions to make them who they are. And on an out breath, sending healing energy to all your fellow trees in this forest, beings. And inhaling the healing and resilience that they carry. Co-healing. And coming up from our tree trunk, hips, base of our body, to the belly, making room for this flow of breath. This nourishing, cool in-breath and the warm, soft out-breath. Letting attention move up the spine to the heart center. Noticing how the heart expands on the in-breath, how it relaxes and opens on the out-breath. Earth, body, breathing. And bringing some attention to the shoulders and just feeling how they relax and how the chest opens with each in-breath and out-breath, like the limbs from the trunk of the tree. Just spreading out these two arms and bowing, waiting at the ends. Letting attention move into the neck and the throat, and just feeling that tree lengthening up into space. The crown reaching up to the sky. And if you like, letting the eyes open a bit and take in that light and space, being a tree in the sky. Grounded, stable, connected, and spacious. So we'll take a short break for 15 minutes And feel free to walk around and enjoy the sunshine, have a cup of tea, and we'll come back at 5 minutes till the hour, I think, if that clock is right. Yes, it is. So 5 till the hour. And we'll maintain silence in here, but you're welcome to check in with each other out there. Mm. All right. So today's teaching, or maybe I want to call it a reflection, is on the topic of mycelial wisdom. And this is the third in a series of 4 teachings, third. And some of you are at the others or some of the others. Yeah. So this is, as I said last month, definitely a new direction for me to be talking about. So it's a little bit of an edge to be talking about this in a spiritual context. And so what I want to talk about today is these, we might say, quiet or sort of these quiet teachings of the world of mycelium, and how those teachings, which are wordless teachings, interface with what this tradition might call the Dharma, or spiritual practice, or meditation practice. And this is inspired just by my own deep curiosity and gradual cultivation of a relationship with the mycelial world and the plant world. And what is mycelium? Mycelium is called by some botanists the wood wide web, the wood wide web, instead of the world wide web. In other words, the internet of the planet. The planet has its own internet. It has its own web of communication underneath the ground, primarily, although it's also on the ground and it's also above the ground, but there's a lot of it under the ground. And what this wood wide web is made of is tendrils, essentially, that are a plant intelligence that we call mushrooms, although mushrooms are really only the fruiting body of mycelium. Mycelium is the web underneath the ground and on the trees, above ground and on the trees. And what we see with our eyes, because it's much more prominent and because mushrooms are very, colorful, and they are sometimes, but they're certainly visually draw our eye, right? They come up out of the ground and often overnight, right? In this magical way that we see them come out, and there's mushrooms where there were not before. Those are the fruiting bodies of this really large web of connection under the soil that connects not only to other mycelium, but also connects to the trees and is part of the communication network of trees, how trees communicate with each other. Just like the World Wide Web is how we communicate with each other sometimes, right? Of course, we have many forms of communication, but so in that same way, the mycelium is this very quiet, underground, not seen really, and the size of it, the scope of it isn't really seen by us, but it's there. And so I want to reflect on that. Like, it's underneath every forest, it's underneath our feet when we walk. And it teaches us something about the ground, that the ground is not just earth or just stone, that the ground is actually this living thing, that the earth is actually a living thing of which we are a part. And this mycelial network is a very interesting metaphor for sort of this broader truth that we are all connected, that we are all part of a web that is unseen, the web of life. And every moment of our life, it's not just us. We are profoundly interdependent with our environment. We live in a web that Thich Nhat Hanh called interbeing. We are part of interbeing. And that's not necessarily how we operate, right? Every day we operate as individuals and we think of ourselves as the center. But actually, we are part of something much, much larger than ourselves. So, so what's been interesting to me is that the more that I reflect on this truth of the mycelium and develop a relationship to this network and to the fruiting bodies of this network as well, I've started to see how many of the teachings from this mycelial network and from the fruiting bodies of this mycelial network are applicable to us as contemplatives, that there are profound teachings to be received from the plant world that we haven't fully even begun to fully understand, or at least I haven't, as an individual who's practicing on a contemplative path that's largely about looking in and seeing what's here, that actually plants can help us see that, not just teachings, but plants can help us see that. And in fact, they can be more than just the more than human world. We can actually give them a seat, a teacher seat. They have wisdom to offer us. So so one of the ways that we can learn from mycelium has to do with this, we could say, the mycelial view that everything feeds everything else and that nothing is wasted. And that the key to the thriving of this network is not this contraction into one node of the network, but it is this expansion into this broader understanding of connection that has a lot to do with metabolizing. So the mycelium, in addition to be the connectors of the trees, the mycelium are also the metabolizers of, they are the masters of decomposition. So when something in the plant world needs to transition, they are there to help. And that includes our own human body, right? When our human body is ready to transition, I mean, even if we're cremated, the mycelium are there to help. So, so I've been thinking about different ways this, we could say this different view, the mycelial view, can help us as we are practicing meditators on a path. What does this view have to offer us? And so for myself, one of the things this view has to offer us, for myself, because I really am resting here on my own journey of developing this relationship with plants in various ways, including seeding, growing things from seed, and so forth, is how we look at what we're doing on the cushion, sort of in this broader view of what we might call in Buddhism waking up. Like we call this waking up. It was what the Buddha identified as, if there was to be a goal of the path, Bodhi. And Bodhi means to wake up. Bodhi means, some people have translated this early on in Buddhism as enlightenment, although now very few people translate that as enlightenment anymore, but they used to. Enlightenment, somehow going from the darkness to the light, or freedom, tarpa in Tibetan. So different Buddhist cultures talked about this differently. What is the goal of our practice? Freedom, enlightenment, waking up. And I think when we're coming to the spiritual path, we're often drawn by that idea. When we first hear about the spiritual path, that, oh, this is a way I can wake up. But at first, we don't really know what that is, right? Necessarily, we just hear there's such a thing. For me, one of the first identifications of that as a thing came through my exposure to transcendental meditation as a child. Transcendental meditation, right? This idea that you can transcend or go to another level or raise your consciousness, right? I was 8 years old when I heard these ideas, and I didn't really know what to do with them. But by the time I was a teenager, I started to get the sense that this was about leaving behind our suffering. It's a very seductive idea, isn't it? I mean, it's often our suffering that brings us to a spiritual path. I mean, we're drawn by wanting to transcend the state that we're in. Like, can't I get out of this dis-ease, out of this cycle, this motivation we have to find peace, find ease. But most of us, at least I remember thinking this was a place that was somewhere else, definitely, this thing called peace. Especially when I was a teenager, right, in the angst of that. Wouldn't it be great to not have this angst? Wouldn't it be great to be free of our anxiety and our depression? And wouldn't it be great if meditation could do that for us, right? How natural that we would be drawn to a path by our own suffering and our wish to ease it. I mean, it's nothing wrong with that. It's very human. It's very animal too. Like animals seek ease. You see any animal stimulated by pain will move away, right? It's very natural. It's not something that's wrong with us. But when we bring that to the spiritual path, there's also this sense that somehow whatever moment we're in is insufficient. That's sort of the shadow of this seeking transcendence. Where I am isn't okay. And who I am isn't okay. If I were better, I wouldn't be feeling all of this, right? So we bring a lot of that to the spiritual path, this wish to get out of the moment we're in and the wish to transcend. There's this kind of tendency also within spiritual communities naturally in response to that hunger that we have as humans to envision the goal of this path as a vertical exit from the human plane into this higher plane, right? Or into this, what we might call enlightenment, or that we might call Bodhi, a vertical longing. We've developed a vertical longing. And so I had that longing as an early practitioner, and I still find myself having that longing. But actually, over time, these decades of practice that I've been in on this path, I've made a discovery, and my relationship with this plant world and the mycelial view has really actually helped me even further to identify the tendency that I have to want to get out of the state that I'm in. Is it actually where the path really is leading us and calling us is back home to the present moment that we're in, that this isn't going to be found somewhere in the future, this more blissful state. And as I started to have started to reflect on that more and more, to practice with that more and more, looking back at the tradition, I think has a lot of clues within it that is actually is where we're headed. And in some ways, I wonder if the institutionalization of religion has encouraged the vertical longing for reasons other than helping to ease the suffering of their congregations, because it sort of puts what you're yearning for up ahead somewhere, which means you have to keep tithing and you have to keep, whatever it is for these institutions. But actually what we're seeking is not out there and not up there. What we're seeking is more down there. And when I say down there, more in the body, more down here in the present moment, and more down here close to the earth, close to the planet. So when the Buddha was practicing, the Buddha actually spent 6 years practicing on the banks of this river, this flowing river in northern India, when he was in his 30s. He was a seeker too, seeking freedom, seeking to get off the wheel of suffering. But where did he finally end up? He ended up in this very intimate connection with the natural world towards, as he was approaching his awakening, his Bodhi. And he ended up at the base of a tree. And that's the tree is this integral part of the whole understanding of what happened to the Buddha. And when he woke up, the story goes, under this tree, actually the very first thing he did was he reached down with his right hand and he touched the earth. And he said, I mean, it's a more complicated story, but he said, the earth is my witness to this awakening. The earth is my witness. He made this gesture of connection to the earth. He actually said, Praviti Mata, Mother Earth. The Mother Earth is my witness to this awakening. And to me, I mean, that's a parable, right? What that means is it was her that helped birth this awakening. He could not have woken up without that connection to Earth, to the planet. So much more about coming home to her than about getting away from her somehow. That story that he was not escaping, but he was engaging. That a Bodhi is not so much about escape as it is about engagement and connection. So I could say more, but I want to turn it over to Zoe because I've been talking for a long time just now, and it's your turn. We'll go back and forth in a minute.
Yes, I was actually, as soon as I saw your notes, I was like, I was going to talk about Sa, the Bhumisaparsha, which is what the Buddha did, putting his hand and touching the earth, like with the earth, with Mother Earth as my witness. So as when Willa so graciously asked me to come and join her today, and she told me the topic, I was like, I'm definitely wanting to talk about this. This is sort of my MO as a Buddhist practitioner. And the reason being this idea, this myth of transcendence, right? Because I think that it's one of those really fundamental core beliefs that are completely natural for us to have as people, right? Like as Willa is saying, this urge to escape our experience, or eliminate our suffering to find something better, which is completely natural, just like Willa described. Plants moving towards light because that's life affirming. Animals running away from pain. You touch a hot stove, your hand gets burned, of course, right? You should have, these are natural, but these tendencies of avoiding suffering, only being drawn towards the things that sort of like affirm temporary joy or things like that, these things, they're all natural impulses, but they can be quite detrimental on our path because it makes it so the path is seen as something apart from us, something that we're embarking on, as if we have to either change who we are to follow it, or that there's some sort of like, somewhere to get from point A to point B, and I'm going to be a different me on the other side, when really the earth as a symbol of being a witness is truly a reminder, a metaphor for the fact that this awakening is really just a recognition or a coming home to our innate nature, which we are always already possessed of. And it isn't something to adopt or reject, but this process of recognizing. And whole societies, and actually our whole notion of the self as being having a singular identity, survives and thrives on the notion of like adopting and rejecting things, right? That's how we form our identity. Like, I'm Zoe. I like comedies. I don't like scary movies. That's me. That's a big part of how I identify. But as we know, those things are always changing. And yet there's this Zoe that I can't quite pinpoint when I sit on the cushion, or, if I cut my hair, am I still Zoe? Am I, as I age over time and things are changing in my body, am I still Zoe? What is the Zoe-ness? Like Willa mentioned in the previous teaching about the Buddha's teaching on the chariot, like, the emptiness of self that we find and that we discover on this path isn't like an elimination of our experience. It's a waking up to the interdependent qualities of our experience. And those are seen clearly through the practice of meditation. Meditation is a process of familiarization. In Tibetan, the word for meditation, one of the words is gom, which literally means to familiarize yourself. Which is quite the opposite of transcending the self. You're actually really sort of reveling in your own experience. You're really being present with things as they are. One of the words for, and forgive me, Vicky, and all the people who see me on Dharma Sundays all the time, I'm always giving this metaphor, but when you have, when I was first learning about this notion of open, spacious awareness, our natural open awareness, one of the words to describe this is rigpa, right? This awareness, our natural state. And the word to describe sort of not knowing or not waking up or not being aware of our awareness, the true nature of our awareness, is simply the negation of the word. It's just ma rigpa. So inside of that term, you notice that's sort of like the etymology of that is reflexive of the fact that they're not two different things. And when we wake up to our experience, we're waking up to really things as they are. And it's just sort of an uncovering. And like with the wisdom of this mycelial network, that sort of metabolizing, that energy, that sort of energy is like taking you're working with the elements that are already there. Those elements, so like the seeds of your quote unquote liberation are within you. They're not without you. And actually, as I've gotten older, I find that more comforting. I think when I was younger, growing up in these societies with these binary models, these dualistic models, these social models, these organized religious models, these Judeo-Christian models, there's this notion of like, there's good, there's bad, there's heaven, there's hell, there's someone more powerful outside of me that will be able to save me. But within the context of the Dharma, which, the Dharma, one of the translations of the word Dharma literally just means phenomena, which is interesting, right? Because we're not saying, I think at the very heart of natural Dharma, like we hear at Wonderwell, natural Dharma, it's just like the mycelium, it's just like the elements in the earth. These things, the truth is as it is. It needs no modification or justification. No one needs to give you permission. That it's a process of sort of opening to yourself as opposed to trying to close or shut down anything. I always love this William Blake quote. I remember I first read it in college, and it really rocked my world. A couple of things that he said really rocked my world. He used to always say, like, all the deities reside in the human breast, right? So that also was, to me, meant to be an expression of the fact that this Bodhi, this awakened heart, this Buddha nature is always already present within us as opposed to being without. And another quote is, if the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. For man has closed himself up till he sees all things through narrow chinks of his cavern. And I would edit it now to sound a little less negative, because I will say, there's nothing wrong with that too. And um, radical acceptance, which is something you can really only begin to source through the practice of meditation, essentially, requires that you're really okay with the narrow chinks too. You have to be aware that um, of your patterns, of your tendencies, without judgment, because it's the judgment that sort of creates the narrows, that chops up the portions of infinity and makes it everything maybe seem a bit claustrophobic or unworkable, as opposed to this sort of earth as metaphor, which is very spacious. The earth is our ground. It has room to hold all of us, to support and sustain our life. And that is an aspect of the nature of mind, is this ground quality. Something I also, to bring back to this metaphor of how the mycelial network can be a helpful way to tune in, is noticing like the elements that you witness in nature, right? That is what our body is made up of. That is also a part of interconnectedness, right? We're made up of earth, air, fire, water. And you can see this, right? I don't know if you've ever felt this, but I used to go for walks in the fall when I lived in upstate New York, and sometimes this wind would come, like these really big winds, and they would shake the trees. And if I was alone on a path, I would sort of feel this sort of like shiver up my back, and it would like almost stir something up in myself, like, oh, there's someone with me, and these elements, like the wind is sort of your energy, this like movement inside of your body, and this energy, your thoughts ride on the wind. Sometimes you're sitting in meditation and it's as if you're a leaf being carried by the wind. You have all these thoughts coming, but that can be related to the wind stirring the leaves around. Or water is said to be a great metaphor for the emotions. And I know Willa's been witnessing my 3 young children. Emotions are very fluid in children. Like there's a sort of immediate, there's these waves can arise, and Uma can be so upset. That's my middle daughter. And the world is basically over. But because she has sort of less of that sticky meta-narrativizing or attachment to that, she allows things to kind of, her wind carries it, the water's moving it. So the next minute she's like giving me a hug, and anything I did to ruin her world is pretty much all said and done for that moment. Or fire, fire, our passion, our desire. Our desire is what makes the world kind of go round, right? That will to live, that's part of our desire, right? Like this will to be close, to connect, to have a connection between others, to connect with yourself, to understand. The drive towards spirituality can also, that's some fire in you. And then earth, like Willa mentioned, this sort of like basis, this holding, the wisdom, there's this grounded nature. And yet the earth isn't this sort of like inert space. It's actually incredibly fruitful. These mushrooms grow out of it. Our bodies are sustained with the plants that grow from it. We all are here because of it, essentially. And then you have space. And space, which is a hugely, I find, for me, who's someone who's kind of anxious, and I can get really small in myself and freaked out and freak myself out. Space is such an important metaphor, like that. Have you ever like gone for a hike or a big walk, and then you're able to stand up over a vista or a mountaintop, and you can sort of like, you just see this expanse of space, of sky, and like there's room. You can take a deep breath, like there's room, there's air to breathe and things to share. something that keeps coming to me when I think of like the path and sort of like the misnomer of when I first learned about a path and like embarking on a path. But really now it is exactly like as Willa said, not like a linear thing, right? This vertical yearning towards like going upwards and transcending, but a deep, deep grounding, an inward looking, and an opening, a direct opening to your experience, embracing fully and completely your experience, anything that arises. And that is something to both strive for, but to strive gently, to walk gently, because it's actually gentleness versus striving that allows for that. Because striving implies a lot of like effort, and sometimes effort means a doing, a lot of doing. But it's rather a leaving, or another way of like another term that's sometimes used in meditation, like namparjak, like letting things fall as they are, letting things come to rest in their own place. And I think that this metaphor that Willa is using today, the teaching of the natural world, and from our body in relation to the natural world, and our body as a part being interconnected with the natural world, is so very vital, and very different from what a lot of us have learned in our world about sort of seeking towards the heavens or something. And again, I could say a lot more, but now I want to interact together.
Thank you, Zoe.
Yeah.
So I've had the pleasure of getting to know her children. I never met her children until this weekend, and I'm getting to know them, and I know what she means about Uma. It's like one moment, just the world is falling apart, and the next moment, everything is absolutely fine.
Yeah.
And, just what a teaching, that we could let things flow like that too. We get so stuck. I think as we grow up, we think a lot more and we kind of ruminate a lot more. I don't see her doing a lot of ruminating. She's like a force of nature at 5, or right?
Totally.
Yeah. 4?
4.
Oh my God.
I know, right? I have still so much more to go with that force.
Oh my gosh. I don't know what's going to be happening in a year. But yeah, it's such a teaching. Children too, such teachers, and they're close to the earth. They're close to their bodies. They're close to their bodies. And as you were talking, I was just thinking about, what's so interesting. It's true that the practices that we do on a contemplative path can increase our relief and our peace. So what we're yearning for is definitely there. It's going to help our suffering, but it isn't a paradigm of escape. And I think when we often come to the path, we're seeking escape. We want to get out so badly of our suffering, and we want to get in to this thing that we imagine is peace. But it's not a paradigm of escape. It's a paradigm, the paradigm that works is a paradigm of maybe metabolization. Is actually metabolizing the source of our suffering, getting down to the source, and then composting. Just like the mycelium, right, are about composting. They don't reject decay. They don't reject what's there. They metabolize what's there. And so I'm thinking that part of what the mycelial view can bring to our practice is this understanding that we can compost our suffering, and that we can compost it, but not until we really get down into it. And that our path is not so much this path of transcendence, the path of vertical exit. as it is a path of waking down. We're still waking, but it's not we're not waking up. I mean, in the sense, I can remember myself, my first station, which is like sort of a long meditation retreat in the Zen tradition. And when I was 15, I went on a weekend station with my father. He took me to this Zendo, Ring of Bones Zendo in Grass Valley, California. It was operated by, help me, Gary Snyder. Gary Snyder was the creator of the Ring of Bones Zendo. He's a great nature writer and poet. And Gary Snyder was there on the station. And I was 15. I was the youngest person there. And it was the longest I'd ever sat in before. And it was my first retreat. It was a long weekend retreat. And I can remember sitting there in the Zendo, and I was so excited to be there. I mean, I loved meditation at that age already. But it was also really hard because it was the longest I'd ever sat still. And my mind was racing. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, maybe I could wake up. And I sort of had this feeling of I'm just going to kind of pop out of my nervousness, like and I'm going to kind of pop up and out. And meanwhile, I'm in this incredible Zendo in the middle of the woods, and the birds are singing and the light is coming. I mean, it was a perfect environment for practice, silent. But actually, it was really hard for me to settle. And I remember thinking, if I could just do what all the great masters did and just kind of pop out, pop up, somehow about that. And I carried that, I think, as this subtle sense of I could just get out of this, right? But no one ever said to me then, go down here, like wake down, come into your body, really go in and really connect and connect down here, right, to the earth. And this is going to teach you what to do, right? But now that's what I do think. I do believe that. So, and part of that is coming or being underscored for me by my relationship now to the plant world and seeing how the trees and the plants are waking down, and saying to me, that's it. It's not about the escape. So even when you were talking, I was like, that was coming into my mind.
Oh, yeah.
That waking down. And I feel like children kind of have that, right? They sort of, they're so connected.
They are so connected. And there's, I think it's a lot of that, like, there's not a lot of ruminating and not a lot of like meta narrativizing that we get, because it isn't, it isn't like the feelings themselves, right? That's actually where the composting or that sort of alchemy comes into being, which is like, if you let yourself really be yourself, like let the awareness fully pervade your whole experience, like witnessing yourself unbiasedly, that's sort of how you get through it, as opposed to, popping out of it, right? You're really like with it, right? Completely. There's a book, I don't know if anyone else here is a parent and has read it, that We're Going on a Bear Hunt. And they chant this tagline over and over again: you can't get over it, you can't go under it, you gotta go through it. And the like wakening down sort of reminds me of that there isn't sort of like any way of, I always had that, like in retreat, I remember I had such a really like strong sense in my body, like, sometimes doing the longer, practices where you have to say like just thousands of mantras, right? And being like, that's like kind of stirs up your elements in the body, your wind. You can get really like agitated. And I would be like, if only I could just and and like, similar to popping out, like, get rid of it, like be better than I am. And I think that is something that children have. There's a natural wisdom to their like identifying with impermanence or something, or like riding the play of things a bit more, which also in a way the natural world does, like when I don't know what a tree is thinking when the seasons change, but they so gracefully shift and alter themselves completely from one season to the next with just this ease of like those leaves just fall and then they just grow back again. Instead of like, when my gray hairs come in and I'm like, I've got to tamp them down. I got to get rid of them. Like there's less of a ruminating quality and more of just like letting things arise and fall naturally in the plant world. I feel like it's such a great, just nature is so amazingly aware of that. Yeah.
So we'd like to open it up to you guys to join us in this reflection on Bodhi, mycelial wisdom, your relationship to the plant world. We'd love to hear from you. And I see Dot there. Hi, Dot. Wait, give us a minute. I think we're trying to unmute you. Oh,
Should be able to go ahead. Unmute.
Can you hear me now?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna say the same thing I've been thinking for the last 50 years, but what's wrong with doing? I've had this problem with Buddhism and every religion, and you're talking about it, this idea of transcending and getting away from and getting up and away from the earth. And now that we have climate change, it's so obvious that we have to do something. And except maybe for the Unitarians and a few others, religion in general seems to be on an escapist route, transcending, getting away from, not being with. And Zoe, when you're talking about your daughter, I thought she could do great things. She's like metabolizing like instantaneously. She's feeling fully and deeply at being herself. And I hope nobody tells her not to do anything. That's not the way to go. So I wonder if you could just talk about what's this thing about not doing some things when here we are on Earth in a relative world. I guess that's all I could say about it.
I fully admit I used the word doing. And I think in this case, Dot, because I think we sort of had a similar conversation last Dharma Sunday where we were talking about like, hey, it feels like the world's falling apart. Anyone else feeling anything? Like anyone? So as soon as I said that word, I was like, that is also tough. So doing, I mean that really specifically in the context of seated meditation. So in the practice of seated meditation, doing refers directly to sort of like this impulse to modify, to either like push a thought away, right? Like I'm thinking too much, I have to stop thinking. So honestly, in your everyday interactions, that might not even seem like doing, but that's what I mean. Sort of, I should have used the word sort of like adulterating or like attempting to alter your experience as opposed to live it fully or like allow yourself to sort of non-judgmentally accept it, which is different, very different, I'll say, from like engaging with the various very pressing issues today, such as climate change, the social activism that is very due in our world, in our political climate, both at home and abroad. So I do not stand as somebody who is feels very firmly about that. That is, I meant that in that specific context. So I'll say that, and then if Willa wants to say anything about, yeah,
No, that was great.
yeah.
Yeah. And we're going Zoom and room. So if anyone has a question, comment, yes.
Hi, thank you so much for this conversation. It just goes along, and some of you who have met me before know that I'm a local farmer and I'm also an herbalist. So I'm very connected to animals and plants, have been since I was a child. I was the child who was in the woods mixing up little potions of different plants and eating things that maybe weren't the best thing to eat, but I figured it out somehow. I'm still here. So what I would say is that, in my aspect as a farmer, I obviously work a lot with the plants, but if you have ever had the opportunity to watch horses out on open pasture when there is a thunderstorm rolling in, they have so much to teach us, because before the lightning hits, all four of their feet will come off the ground for a momentary second. And they may be spooked by it and take off or rear up or act out, but within moments of that lightning passing, they are back to grazing. It's like, and so it reminded me so much of your daughter. And I think that's such a beautiful thing that she's offering to us, and that animals teach us as well. And how do the plants bend during a storm? And you walk out into the garden and things are bent over and you're thinking, oh goodness, is this ever going to recover? But the next day somehow they're right back up doing it again. And when I'll change topic here on the vertical goal, I loved that part of this conversation. And I always thought of that vertical goal, and it came to my mind instantly, Dr. Gabor Mate. Many of you may have read some of his material, but he says that like temporary joy leads us into the realm of the hungry ghost. And so we're seeking this realm that's just full of these ghosts that are gobbling us up, as opposed to Thich Nhat Hanh saying the way out is in, just in. And then the last thing I want to just comment about the element conversation is, in my study of Ayurveda and Ayurvedic medicine, what are we trying to do in our bodies is balance our elements. And so and we know that if we're having too much fire, there are certain spices or herbs or things we can do to cool the fire in the body. Versus if we're too cool and damp and moist, maybe we need to add more heat. And so the tradition of Ayurveda teaches us how to balance that through these beautiful plants and herbs and spices that we can consume. So thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I see we've got one on Zoom. I'll let our host help
Hey,
us.
Rick, go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, thank you.
Hey.
Hi,
Nice to see you back home.
Yeah, nice to see the meditation hall again after 3 days away. So I wanted to say something about plant medicine and the practice and recent experience, and we could turn this into a question somehow. But I've been working with plant medicines for the last 2.5 years, I guess after about a 40-year hiatus. This time with a lot more intention and a guide, actually. It seems like a good idea. And, in some ways, I feel like I did have a transcend, hope or approach. Although I will say it got me back into having a practice again, as cliched as that is. Got me, sitting on a cushion every day and really pursuing, which has happened to me 40 years ago, but here I am again. I had a recent experience, though, that I thought I would relate, because the most recent time was the end of March, and I, I thought my set and setting was perfect, and my intention was the Leonard Cohen line: "You lose your grip, and then you slip into the masterpiece." So I had a very, sort of intention for a real cosmic experience, and what happened was different. I had an eye mask on, I had my music on, and I started having, really disturbing visions. I mean, demonic visions, and they were of Donald Trump and all his entourage in a very sort of carnivalesque type of vision. It was, deeply disturbing. And I took my mask off, and it wasn't like it was going to, ruin my whole night, but I was disturbed because, again, I thought my set and setting was, just right where it should be. I noticed it was lightning outside, and I ran outside to the porch, and it was pouring rain, and the sound of the rain and the peepers, which were screaming, and the sheet lightning, just was like a shot in the heart. It was like the antidote to that anxiety. A couple of weeks later, I really identified it with green Tara, but at the time, I just thought Mother Nature, or the beloved. It was just really was my cure. But that's, so that was one important takeaway. But the other was that this connection, this interdependence, isn't just to nature; it's to humans, and that. I thought a lot. You mentioned Gary Snyder, and I thought he's sort of a hero. And I thought a lot about how he always talked about and was critical of certain practices where you indulge yourself in ignorance of the nature of social organizations and politics. And so I'm still struggling to find the blend. How do I balance involvement and activism and awareness of what's going on, because I think it's really important, with taking care of myself and being there for my family and my grandkids, and keeping my sanity. Um, so, that was the message from the plant medicine. I'm not sure how to work with it in a spiritual practice, because in what I read, in all the podcasts I listen to, which are very contemporary in terms of the Dharma, um, I hear very little about genocide. I hear very little about what what's going on in this country is really doing to people. I hear that elsewhere. I have, my political sources, but I don't hear it much in the Dharma world. And I'm trying to figure out myself how to kind of blend all this together. So anyway, sorry for such a long comment, and that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Rick. I appreciate your comment. And yeah, and I think we could probably do better as, spiritual guides in that realm. Some people that I know in the Dharma world are better at talking about those things than others, and better at bringing that sort of social political awareness into the Dharma hall and talking about it, like Lama Rod Owens is an example of somebody who's really made that the center of his teaching in certain ways. But I think the Dharma itself, personally, first of all, doesn't discourage action. I think that, and so I'm sort of speaking to Dot here a little bit too, and sort of kind of bringing that around into what you're saying, that what the Dharma encourages is wise and compassionate action. But in order to kind of really engage in wise and compassionate action, we have to spend some time learning how to just be. And that practice of learning to let go of really impulsive and compulsive patterns, because that's what we're untangling there, is our compulsion and our impulsiveness and our compulsiveness as human beings. Some of what we're doing when we sit is beginning to just notice that we have a compulsive side and we have an impulsive side, and noticing that we can make a choice between our compulsive habits and some wiser direction, right? So it's not about turning away from engagement. The Dharma is not about that. In fact, the Buddha himself was an activist. I don't know how much you've read of that. Many of us have not read the original Pali Canon, but you can read it. It's online at accesstoinsight.org. And if you read it, he addresses the caste system, which was the big social wrong in his society. He has all kinds of teachings that are very clever about upending the caste system. I mean, he was a great upender of the caste system, the Buddha was. So if we look back to those earliest days, the very founder was an activist, and his teachings were activism. So we hope to try to keep leaning into that vein. Yeah. So I appreciate your bringing it up. But I do think because we talk so much about being and so much about letting go of doing, we do talk about that in our teachings. It's not about letting go of activism. It's not about letting go of what you do off the cushion, which is very important. That's in line with the Bodhisattva's intention. But it's about finding space in yourself to discover who we are. And in discovering who we are, we help bring a greater wisdom into the world. So it's just that. Yeah. But I really appreciate.
Yes.
It's great to bring that up. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Karen. And I would like to mention to the last person that every Wednesday night, NDF has a group online called Mary Mahakalas. And actually the purpose of it is really to dig in together into what's happening in the world today and how can we meet that with wrathful compassion, but also with joy at the same time, the joy we find, being together and talking about it. So it's mainly Sangha led. It's different every week, and there's a lot of small group discussion also where you can really share your concerns and your ideas. And that's at 5:30 on Wednesday nights. And I also had a comment. Zoe reminded me of a wise thing my then 7-year-old said. So we were walking on a beautiful fall day, and she said, what would people think if their hair turned color in the fall and just fell out? That would be really hard for humans, but it's so easy for the trees. And I thought, whoa, that's so true. I mean, I wrote down the things this kid said because there are always zingers like this. And, and also it points to this idea of what we fight in our own bodies, whether it's aging or whether it's sickness or whether it's what's happening and frustrating us in the moment, trying to transcend it rather than just naturally, letting those emotions carry us through what we need to metabolize. So I always go back to that, okay, if my hair fell out and changed color once a year, how would I handle that? That's something to practice with.
Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing.
Thanks, Karen. Online there. Oh, we can take one on Zoom.
Okay, David. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Ellen. Thank you, everyone. Wonderful talk. Very apropos. I've been sitting with medicine for a couple weeks now. When I saw this, I was actually in ceremony, and I tried to make it live, but this is the first live one, so glad to be here. Came from ceremony on Friday as well. Just to give some context, I'm a therapist, psychoanalytically trained practitioner, returned to Dharma 6 years ago, similarly to someone else, following plant medicine use and a lot of other synchronicities. So not to get into sobriety and so on and so forth. But I do have a question, and maybe even a comment that leads into the question, which is plant medicine use sort of teaches me, and I love the comment about getting back into presence because and accepting what is, because when I'm in ceremony, if I'm not having the visions or I'm not getting the message or whatever I want, I can get lost, attached, go back into all the stories. So good reminder to just receive whatever is coming up, even if it's nothing, seemingly nothing at all. And I've learned that sometimes the best medicine is outside of ceremony, like this Dharma talk right now, and the teachings and transmissions that are coming through. So again, much appreciation. But my question in the number of previous talks, I just wonder about the reification of plant medicine use and this notion of transcendence, seeking the other, the holy other, the mystery outside of myself, rather than within. And I think it was said, seeds of liberation are within me. And I know the tendency when I'm in plant medicine, and maybe it's because I'm a recovering Roman Catholic, is to see spirit as somehow other, but in a reified other that becomes like, you know, a self, which is just another thing, substantive, again, transcendent. And I guess, again, thank you, because this is a constant reminder of how my mind wants to trick me and use language and thoughts and discursive thinking to say, oh, spirit is the medicine, which is the Aya, or the maestro, the fellowship, the Sangha. And even if I say now, I guess, so my question is again, the trap is, okay, I want to locate it within myself. But self and other is no different. There is no inner and outer. I want to rest in the sort of open awareness of just this. And it's so tough to do. And so any suggestions on how to do that, specifically when I'm in ceremony under the medicine? I mean, I practice, I try to sit in meditation, try not to grasp, cling, turn away. Somebody said there's horrible visions of Trump. You know, the no bad parts, as IFS teaches. I mean, so for me, it's again resting in whatever comes, receiving it, accepting it as the seeds for my own liberation in a tantric way. Any suggestions how to do that other than to just relax? But if you have anything to say about that, again, specifically to plant medicine, integrating it with my mindfulness practice, when again, the small mind wants to say, oh, this is a message, again, a meta narrative, oh, message from plant, message from spirit. So I don't know. I hope that's clear what I'm asking.
Yeah, so I just want to commend your self-awareness around even asking the question. So, and I want you to commend yourself, especially for, I mean, you know, respect yourself for that, because sometimes we think we have to solve this, and we don't necessarily. Just to say that, you know, you're on a path of healing, and you're on a path of waking down. I'm just going to use that because I like it. And that is a process. And in the process, sometimes we need sets and settings of some kind to, you know, because, you know, you can be on the path for four decades and still be using what we call in the Vajrayana skillful means. You still seek skillful means. You still, but what you get better at is realizing they are not an answer in themselves. They are an assist. The answers are going to come from within you.
Right.
But there's an assist quality, and I feel like practices are an assist, and sometimes plant medicine is an assist. But even noticing that you're, you know, you may be clinging to the medicine. We can cling to the medicine. We can cling to any medicine. We can cling to meditation too. That the path is about not engaging, because it is engaging. Right. We want to engage. Engaging is a way of setting up, set and setting. Meditation and retreat are set and setting also. Set and setting.
Familiarize.
And medicine, you know, it's all, and the meditation is the medicine. Right. But the sense of that is we can cling to meditation. We can cling to experiences in meditation. We could cling to anything. In fact, that's what we do, is we're pretty good at that. So part of the practice is just, you know, just that, what you said it, relax. It's okay.
Yeah. And just something that you said about healing. I mean, just again, back to the meta narrative. I mean, as a psychotherapist, and I got into plant medicine to heal, again, coming out of recovery, even meditation, I'm realizing to the question about doing, I then end up doing and efforting healing. So the healing becomes this narrative, which is the trap, because then I'm like, oh my God, you know, I'm seeking, and then the seeking itself becomes this sort of vicious circle for me. And it's like, okay, relax, you know, there's nothing to heal. And I don't want to get, you know, too much non-dual spiritual bypassing, but I mean, there's a really deep teaching and equanimity, which is, I'm good if I could just relax and release and allow. So, yeah, I mean, again, just with that language of healing as a psychotherapist, I could do psychotherapy, psychedelic psychotherapy, but spiritual practice in plant medicine, the biggest teaching of all is it's already here. I don't need to do anything. Relax. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for offering your experience. We are at time, and I see there are still hands, and I hope you can all just take what it is that you have to ask, and can you write it down or store it? And we're going to be back together again in just a couple weeks, or maybe 3 weeks together. If you want to come, then we will continue this theme and topic. So please bring those with you and hold them in your heart. And thank you. There's nothing better than the power of an open question. So may we always have questions and hold them close to our heart. And we're going to dedicate at the moment with our dedication on page 15. Maybe we'll dedicate with it's actually Tsoni Rinpoche's Heart Advice on page 14. Let's do that first. It's kind of about relax, relax. My yang is actually do not be distracted, but the essence of this song is you are sufficient as you are. And there's still work to be done. Mying, dren pe chan so tsu. Ying wei lam la de chi chak pa ye. Shak dan shin pe sem chi du yen pe. Ni zhen kan ra ju me mo tu. Kada ma shi rang san gun shi te. Sanje shen la me do rang sha tu. Shen e so ju me da rang sa jo. Ma gon nan ru yen pe cha sa zen. Be not distracted, be not distracted. Plant the watchman of mindfulness. On the path of distraction, the thief of Mara lies in wait. Because the mind of attachment and aversion is Mara, regard it as illusion, free from all duality. Once your own mind is known to be primordial purity, free from contrivance, there is no other Buddha. Look at your own face. There is nothing else to realize. So rest at ease. This is spontaneous non-meditation. Take the Buddha's seat. Changchu Samcho Rinpoche Ma Che Panam Che Jorchi Che Panyam Pa Me Payam Gong Ne Gong Du Pelwar. May the pure, brilliant sun of bodhicitta dawn in each and every heart and mind, dispelling the darkness of suffering and confusion unstoppably until all are fully illumined and awakened. Thank you, everyone. Thank you
Thank
all
you.
for coming today. Those of you that are here in body, and those of you that are here in the amazing ether realm coming in to see us and be with us today. Thank you so much. And we do have a potluck afterwards, and wish we could share it with all of you too. So please join us for that. And Zoe and I will be here. So please come up and introduce yourselves to us. So thank you. Thank you, everybody
Thank you.
online. Great to see you. And thanks, everyone.
Thank you.